Welcome back. We are talking taxes this morning. Some New York lawmakers have told me they will vote no for the House GOP tax bill. I asked Vice President Mike Pence in this exclusive if he believes they have the votes to get this past the finish line, given the pushback on higher rates for some Americans. You personally, Vice President Mike Pence, would you agree to a 45.6% rate for the highest earners?
I support the president's commitment to keep the top marginal rate at 39.6%. And we're going to continue to drive toward that because the president wants to see marginal rates lowered on middle-class Americans, on working families. And I think at the end of the day, when this process comes to fruition, the American people are going to see not only the largest tax cut in American history, but they're also going to see a tax cut that really focuses on empowering working Americans to be able to have more dollars in their pockets, empowering businesses, large and small, to be able to invest in ways that will create jobs. And I look forward to supporting it and championing it all over the country.
Do you expect mobility as a result of this plan? In other words, some people are saying, look, there's going to be a mass exodus out of New York, because why would someone in New York say, oh, I'm losing that deduction, now my rate is 53% when you account for state and local taxes, and not go to Florida where they can get a 25% rate and no income tax? So do you think people will leave some of these high state taxes? Eventually, will the elimination of that deduction pressure governors to make change?
Well, that'd be a good question for economists, and the simple fact is that there are some very high tax states in the country that have benefited by those deductions in the past. But I think what the president wants to see us do is look for ways that we can simplify the tax code, that we can lower taxes on working families. And let me be clear, we think the House bill that was unveiled last week is a great start. We look forward to the introduction of the Senate legislation in the next several days. But as we go forward, the president's focus here is all about jobs. It's all about the middle class. It's all about making sure that people have more dollars in their pockets, businesses have more resources, and a growing economy, I believe, is going to benefit people in our big states, in our small states, and everywhere in between.
Let me ask you about the road to passage.
Right.
Can you identify any Democrats who will vote yes to this plan?
Well, I could tell you the president and I continue to be hopeful, and we continue to reach out in a bipartisan way to leaders in the House and in the Senate. Look, when you look at when President Kennedy passed historic tax cuts, when President Reagan passed historic tax cuts, those were bipartisan bills. President Trump has been meeting with, breaking bread with Democrats in the Senate and in the House, looking for ways that we can go forward together. But we want to go forward in a way that reflects President Trump's framework for tax reform. It's focused on the middle class. It's focused on job creators and businesses having more dollars to invest and create jobs. That's focused on simplification. And Democrats who will join us in that, we'll welcome them and be grateful for their support.
So if you don't have the votes, then it doesn't matter how great the plan is. I mean, I know a few New Yorkers who will vote no because of the elimination of the deduction of state and local income tax. Do you think you have the votes?
Well, we're optimistic at this point. I have to tell you, Maria, I've never seen the level of unity and enthusiasm among Republicans on Capitol Hill that I've seen in their commitment to passing historic tax cuts for the American people. Look, this economy is starting to grow. I mean, even despite the hurricanes and the wildfires that beset areas of our country in the last month, we still saw more than 3% growth in the third quarter, following on 3% growth in the second quarter. I think there is a real understanding that with the right kind of tax cuts, we can have the kind of sustained growth that takes us well beyond 3%, that has this economy growing back at a level of 3.5% or even 4%. I mean, in President Donald Trump, the American people have a leader who has boundless confidence in the American people and in the capacity of the American economy to grow and expand and create jobs. And that enthusiasm and that unity gives us great confidence as we move forward in the House, move forward in the Senate, and into negotiations in December, that before Christmas, President Trump is going to have historic tax cuts on his desk and be able to sign them into law.
More on my exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence coming up. We are discussing why he thinks tax reform will help working American families. Also, we're getting into other issues. Stay with us on that. But first, take a look inside the cockpit of Air Force Two. I got a chance to sit up there as they took off and landed. It was pretty exciting. We'll bring you more of that interview exclusive right here on Sunday Morning Futures next. Welcome back. The House GOP tax plan makes changes to some of the most popular deductions and credits for millions of American families. But many Republicans, including Vice President Mike Pence, say middle-class taxpayers will see the most benefit. Watch. There's a conversation taking place about family values as well, about the adoption credit being taken away, the interest on student loans, eliminating the medical deduction, severely impacting the middle-income families. What's your take on that?
I think when you begin by doubling the standard exemption, you say to every working family in America, like here in York, Pennsylvania, your first $24,000 in income for your family is completely tax-free. When you increase the per-child tax credit, families already have a running start on real tax relief. And the kind of growth in wages that we believe will occur with the right kind of business tax cuts, we estimate here in Pennsylvania that after all these tax cuts take effect, that working people here in Pennsylvania will see a $4,000 pay raise on an annual basis. So we think the right kind of tax cuts, the tax cuts President Trump is calling for, are going to be a real winner for working families. And we look forward to championing them on Capitol Hill and driving that tax cut bill all the way to the president's desk. The president, of course, on an important trip right now in Asia. You are the chairman of the U.S.-Japan dialogue. The president will meet with the president of China on Wednesday. What can he really accomplish on this trip? What would you like to see him come away with? And of course, in terms of getting China to be more helpful in reining in North Korea, can he actually move the needle on that? Well, the president has embarked on what we believe will be a historic trip to the Asia Pacific, and he's bringing with him a commitment to the alliances that we have in the region, to calling on our allies in the region, from Japan to South Korea to Australia to the Philippines, and to his meetings with President Xi in China, that we need to continue to do all that we can together to isolate North Korea economically and diplomatically. And I expect those will be in the forefront of the president's discussions when he starts in Japan a little bit later today. But make no mistake about it, President Trump's going to be in the Asia Pacific, but he's going to be talking about jobs. And he tasked me after my trip to the region to engage in a bilateral dialogue with my counterpart in Japan, Deputy Prime Minister Aso, about ways that we can address what is a $70 billion trade deficit that the United States has with Japan to this day. And I expect focusing on allowing American automobiles to have better access to the Japanese market, American agriculture to have better access to the Japanese market, will be in the forefront of their discussions today. So while the president is very much focused on security issues, on bringing nations together, and to resolve the growing crisis that we face with the provocations, the nuclear program and the ballistic missile program in North Korea. Make no mistake about it, President Trump's going to be talking American jobs, and he's going to be talking about not just free trade, but fair trade and better deals that'll be a better deal for the American worker. I know when he came back from the Mideast, he said he did $400 billion in deals. Is he expecting to do that kind of volume of deals? Well, stay tuned. We've been doing some work in anticipation of this. The president, as you know, has developed a strong relationship with Prime Minister Abe, with President Xi, with President Moon in South Korea. And as I said, while he'll be focused on strategic issues and security issues, anybody who knows President Trump knows he's going to be focused on jobs, he's going to be focused on trade, and making sure that these important relationships that we have also are a winning trade relationship. I mean, you think about a $70 billion deficit with Japan, we have a $30 billion deficit with South Korea. following the Korean-U.S. free trade agreement. President, I know, is going to be talking with those leaders about leveling the playing field so that our trade relationships are a winner for American workers.
Vice President Pence, you mentioned security. The president would like to do away with the visa lottery.
Right.
Is that something you'd like to see happen right away? Should this be part of a broader border immigration reform package?
Well, President Trump and I met this week in the Oval Office with a number of senators about a number of immigration issues, whether it be DACA or the president's commitment to build a wall and border security. And the president added to that list this year his desire to see us end the visa lottery program that was the very means whereby the New York terrorist was able to gain access to this country. We need ultimately to move to a merit-based system in this country. We ought to be asking the question of what are the needs of our communities and our economy in our immigration program. But ending this visa lottery program is important to President Trump, and he's calling on the Congress to take action this year to bring an end to that program, even as we're calling on them to address the DACA issue, as the president said he's willing to, in the midst of ending chain migration, providing resources to build the wall, and providing all new funding for the kind of security that'll make sure that from our border to internal enforcement that we have the ability to enforce the laws of this land.
You know, you make a great point, because the budget was $500 billion overspending in 18, same thing for 19. You've got to spend money on the military given these new threats that we have and that we're faced with. And yet, the deficit hawks are saying, when are we going to get our arms around the debt and deficit? So when does that become a priority? And maybe it's not a priority now because your priority is growth, but when does it become a priority? And when it does, do you attack the entitlements?
Well, I can tell you from the first days of this administration, President Trump has been telling every agency of government to sharpen its pencils. And the president's budget and all our actions going forward represent his commitment to fiscally responsible spending. But to speak to President Trump about the issues of long-term debt and deficits is to hear that he believes growth is the answer. And that's the reason why I'm here in Pennsylvania. That's the reason why members of our cabinet are going to be fanning out all across the country in the coming weeks to take the case for historic tax cuts directly to the American people.
Coming up, more of my interview with the Vice President, I asked Mr. Pence what he thinks about President Trump's call on the Justice Department to investigate Hillary Clinton. That's next as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures right here. Welcome back. President Trump making headlines this past week by calling on the Justice Department and the FBI to investigate former political rival Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. I sat down with Vice President Mike Pence and asked him what he thought about some of the criticism the president has received as a result. The president has also been tweeting about the DOJ. People are scratching their heads. They don't understand. He's the president. Why does he have to tweet the DOJ should look at this? Is it appropriate for the president to ask the Department of Justice to investigate his political enemy, Hillary Clinton?
I think the one thing people here in Pennsylvania like about President Trump is you always know where he stands. He speaks his mind, and sometimes he tweets his mind. And I think the president said as he was leaving for this trip to the Asia Pacific that he just thinks he'd like to see the DOJ just do their job, and I believe that the American people understand that and respect that. But they can be assured, as he travels overseas, being a champion for American security, being a champion for American jobs and better trade deals, as we continue to canvass across this country, we're going to stay focused on the issues that really matter most to the American people, which are security, prosperity, and I believe at the end of the day we're going to make America prosperous again, we're going to make America safe again.
Is the DOJ doing their job?
We're going to continue to see the growth.
Is the DOJ doing their job?
I think the president expressed that he'd like to see them do their job in a broad range of areas, and you know, I'll leave it at that. I think he's expressed himself very clearly, Maria.
Mr. Vice President, my final question. It was 1 year ago this week that you were voted into office. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you changed? Has the president changed in these 10 months?
Well, it's been an incredible experience for my little family to be able to be a part of this administration over the last year, to have been a part of a historic campaign that won states like here in Pennsylvania. This is a president who, on that election day, won 30 of 50 states. More counties than any candidate since Ronald Reagan. I mean, literally turned the blue wall red across the heartland of America. But I think the great thing 1 year on is that while there's been so much change for the good in America, that President Trump hasn't changed at all. I had someone stop me on a rope line the other day, shook my hand, and they said, "Don't those people in Washington know that we don't want him to change?" And the great thing about President Donald Trump is he hasn't changed. He continues to speak straight from his heart, straight from his mind. He continues to drive forward to keep the promises that he made to the American people. And it's the greatest honor in my life to be some small part of that.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria.
My thanks to Vice President Mike Pence. In a moment, the pushback. Some Republicans are raising concerns over the House bill. Up next, I'll talk to New Jersey Congressman Tom MacArthur. He'll tell me why he's not fully on board. We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Future. Stay with us.